they make decisions. They would dramatically change the impact they have for those they serve. Is that basic?
I thought it was interesting this morning in the discussion with the panel about the difference between a corporate board versus a nonprofit board in their reliance on information. Why does it have? Why is it different? Does it have to be different? What's wrong?
Well, to answer your question, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that comment, and not all are bad. I mean, it's just, but there's, I think I use the phrase, it's a mindset difference. I don't believe management is recognized or rewarded in a nonprofit. I think it's that simple. You know, we recognize a lot of other things, but because you're an effective manager, it might mean that's defined by the impact you're having on people. Simply is not rewarded, it's not recognized. And so you don't see the same perks, reward structures to encourage that. So, and one of the things you tend to see, and I'll give you examples of, and I found this, by the way, I've not seen an exception so far, short of some recent business I made, of people I started with originally, where there wasn't either a severe or total absence of information to make decisions. And I mean some big organizations too. And I think that the way I used it in one case, I was working a very good leader, and I had to spend time with them. I simply said, when you make your decisions, do you realize that you're either being reactive or you're being whimsical? And it wasn't appreciated, obviously. But the point is, that's how decisions are being made. And I simply said, if you had data about what you did, would that help? And I've been through very accomplished schools today, and they really can't tell you, they'll give you the marketing pitch. They can't tell you, if their students, what they've really learned. And it's about information.
Are people in the nonprofit world, in particularly nonprofit boards, which I'll comment a little bit later, are they afraid of data?
It's a good question, and again, it has many different answers to it. I just did 2 columns. There's a phrase in the nonprofit world, which I think, by the way, is very true as a generalization, that business people on boards check their brains at the door. It is more true than not, in all honesty. I wrote a subsequent column, though, that didn't build on that. I said we too often check our courage at the door. And by that I mean the types of hard questions one should be asking today tend to invite a necessary degree of tension by definition, and what I call constructive conflict. That's not the way a lot of people want to run. They're not comfortable doing that. So you'll find that kind of questioning, that asking the hard question, is not a norm at all in the field.
I'm sure some of you in the room, and I know many of Mario's colleagues, have dealt with the following situation, and I get a few of them as well. People will call me and said they would like me to be on a nonprofit board, and I will resist. And they'll say, well, we just need your name on the letterhead, and you don't have to do anything. And I think of some of these not-for-profit organizations that I'm not going to mention that had big blowouts in the last decade or so. Everybody had their name on the letterhead, but nobody felt responsible. They felt there was somebody else up and down that letterhead that really should be responsible, that it wasn't them. I mean, when I came to George Mason, I did something I had done both at Florida and at Cornell. I asked for the preparation of a 2-page document, one that laid out all the sources of funds, and the other one that laid out the usages of funds. All sources, all usages by certain categories that we would define. And it only took 3 months to get it. It just wasn't part of what was going on at the university. And I think with respect to all nonprofits, is you got to know where all the money comes from, and you got to know where all the money goes, because if you don't, someone is always going to be assuming someone else has got a better deal. And the only way you can get beyond that is by showing where all the money goes.
Can I answer that? I want to share a story. I used it in a column I wrote. Was that I won't name the organization. It's a regional organization. You know the organization. I went on the board. Now, and I'm going to say my journey was probably not unlike a lot of other people from the business world. I had not a clue how a nonprofit operated. I was asked to go on this board. I had no specialty knowledge of their area. It was an area of interest. They were dying to get me on the board. What they were meaning is they were dying to get a check. I mean, cut through the crap. I mean, that's what the game is. So I go on the board, and my first meeting, I'm watching the chairman and the executive director go at each other. I mean, they're literally in total conflict in the board meeting. I'm thinking, holy Christ. You know, and then a couple board meetings going on, you realize this organization's in deep trouble, and you're sitting there, and you don't know enough. You're hesitant because you're on weak ground. You're sort of, you don't know yourself. You're not coming from the corporate world. So you don't ask any questions because you don't know enough to ask the question. And you're watching all this go on. And it was a travesty. And the place was going to go bankrupt, and we finally called an audit. And this is a true story. I mean, they asked, in the audit, they found a folder with stock certificates that had never been cashed that allowed them to pay off the debt they had. Yeah, and I sat there for meetings as a board member not asking a question because I wasn't confident enough in myself. I was too hesitant. And I'll tell you, because you go on boards not realizing it's about work. See, we bring people on boards to make them feel good. That's the wrong way you bring people on boards. You bring them on board to add value, to question you, to be a constructive partner in serving mission. Not for the name, not for the dollar. We got it all backwards.
What's the difference between a for-profit and a not-for-profit organization?
It's a great question, and I would have probably answered it a lot differently 18 years ago. I've gained a healthy respect for nonprofit cultures and systems, and I think that's the hardest thing for someone who comes from the business world to adjust to. I think who said it best was Jim Collins in his monograph, and he said I don't, my team will probably throw up on me, but I mean, I stopped using running like a business within 1 year of creating Venture for Life Partners. I dropped all reference to running like a business. I think it's a false statement to make. And what I mean by that is, you're not running like a business. You know, are you running like Tyco? Which bad business are you running like, by the way? I mean, think about that. You running like Wall Street? Merrill Lynch? Or are you running as a disciplined executive? That's what Collins points out. I would argue you're a very disciplined executive. The question is not whether you're a business executive, you're a government executive, not-for-profit executive. The question is, are you a good executive? And a good executive is somebody who's disciplined and focused and has courage and can inspire and can hire. I mean, so the sector doesn't matter. What changes enormously, though, in the nonprofit world are the social complexities that one faces on the sheer issues you're saving. And it comes in two ways. There's a long answer, but there was an executive in Cleveland recently, was interim CEO for the school system. He made the comment, and it's an and Dan's going to, I think, relate to the comment. He simply said, I had to close a school, and to me, as a business person, this was, you know, it's a building, shut it down, and the game. Well, he said, I couldn't imagine how many people came out of the woodwork with compelling stories about why this school didn't have to change, from mothers who were single parents saying, I can't handle the traffic, the transportation, because I get my kid to school so I can catch 2 buses to get to. I never had. He says, it was the first time I realized that people in poverty carry enormous burdens simply to get by on the day. And if you don't know that world, then this thing you think is a simple A to B answer, you're going to screw up big time. Because there's enormous social complexity that you got to think through, anticipate, and navigate through. That's the big difference. The social complexities of the issues you're dealing with and the ecosystems you have to deal with to get something done effectively.
Mario and I started to exchange some emails over the last month, and I sent him 2 of my one-liners, and he commented on both of them. The first one was what my perception with respect to not-for-profits, or I'll use George Mason University as an example. We don't run George Mason University like a business because it's not a business. We run George Mason University in a business-like fashion. Now that's a play on words, and I'll accept the guilt, but it's exactly what has to happen. One, from my perspective, it's not a bit. The bottom line isn't there, as it is in the corporate world, but the practices are there. Knowing where all the money comes from, knowing where all the money goes. Statements that I've made over the years is, if you spend $1 in the wrong way, that's $1 I don't have left to spend in the right way. If you spend $1 in the wrong way, it's $1 I don't have left. All the issues of authority, responsibility, transparency, I don't, at least from my perspective, are not any different from the for-profit and the profit. Now, I will have people, and we had it happen the other day in a session, a not-for-profit session that I was in, where someone, I can't remember the topic anymore, but it was, someone had a great idea for something this organization should do. And someone said, well, how much is it going to cost, and how are you going to get the money? And she said, oh, I don't worry about things like that. Someone else has got to find out how much it's going to cost, and someone else has got to go and get the money. And we all pleasantly, politely, as I'm sure you would gather, said, no, you got to get involved. You may not be the person who's driving it, but you can't say, I got a bright idea, the rest is left to the reader. The rest is hard. And I think too many times my wife, as many of you know in the room, my wife's been very involved in many nonprofits. And that has always been the issue that she says, is that people got bright ideas, they just don't have the time and the commitment to, in a sense, get the money. So one, not run it like a business, but run in a business-like fashion. There's another issue that Morino and I communicate back and forth, and I'll say what it is, and then you'll get his response. I don't know if you ever heard the story of the person crawling under a light pole on all fours, and someone walks up to him and says to them, what are you doing? And he says, well, I lost my contacts over there about 20 yards from here. And they said, well, why are you crawling around here? And he said, the light's better. I think to a minor degree in the for-profits, we have that problem. We measure what's easy to measure, and then it becomes important, as opposed to deciding what's important and then deciding what we should measure. And I stole some of that from Mario's book. Mario, your thought on that?
No, I think the whole issue of management in general, knowing what your outcomes are, how you use that information, are all really, critical issues. And we wrote an article. The first article we wrote was basically we can't see the forest from the trees, because you have people measuring without any idea why they're measuring, or flooding themselves with all kind of information, and losing sight of what's going to be usable, or not measuring at all. And to give you some context, that when I say these things, when I go back to the company Tim mentioned I was in, what I did as a profession for over almost 30 years was implement performance management systems for Global 500 corporations. And now we were trying to help them figure out how their technology was being deployed, which actually has some interesting parallels, because it's an ambiguous type of result that one gets. But when you install a performance management system for Boeing worldwide, you're going to go through some hell. And because you're dealing with management issues and information issues, but you got to produce results. The problem in the field today is the issue of what works. I think it's you asked some other questions. We have enormous fear that we're going to show the emperor wears no clothes with a lot of people. This is for foundations and nonprofits alike, by the way. And this is a generalization. There's many people doing phenomenal work. Do not let me confuse that. But let me give you an example. We used two references in the book that was suggested to go in the book. And it's Darren Scared Straight. And I was reluctant to use them because, libel issues, you see pockets to them. But we did some research, and the data was so compelling that people said, don't worry, they couldn't take you on in a million years. And here's Scared Straight. It's a program that they take kids in, offenders, to prisons to scare them so they'll go straight. It's now proven that it increases violence. It's funded robustly, and recently a TV station wanted to run a show on it, and we inquired as to why. And they said, we know it doesn't work, but it sells well. Ladies and gentlemen, I present you the nonprofit funding sector. It shows